Okay, good afternoon, everybody. Hope you're having a good day here, Friday, May 29th, almost to June, almost to the end of the academic quarter. It's been certainly a very interesting academic term for all of us. And as is customary, we wanted to have our monthly meeting with graduate students who are available to basically receive any announcements and also answer any questions. The last couple of times we all did this in a webinar format. We decided this time to do it in traditional Zoom room format to allow for a little bit more of interaction between all of us. I'm joined by several members of the graduate division staff, but I do want to point out that one person in particular will be helping me here, and that's Associate Dean Judy Kim. Let me go ahead and advance the slides here. What we want to let you all know is we are recording this session and it will be made available at a later time. So if there's anybody who wants to watch this or rewatch this, they can, or if any of your colleagues may not be able to actually be here at this moment, please do advise them that they can watch this at a later date, and we'll post that on our graduate division website. Okay, so let's just welcome here. This is going to be formally hosted by Judy Kim, Associate Dean in the Graduate Division and Professor in Chemistry, and by me. I'm Jim Antony. I am the Dean of the Graduate Division and Professor in Education Studies, and we're happy that you took the time to join us today. Our hope is to just give you some basic updates about a few things, and then we'll leave plenty of time for Q&A. As is true with any of these Zoom sessions, we're going to encourage you to use the chat feature at the bottom of Zoom. You can go ahead and type in your questions there if you have any, and we'll try and get to those as quickly as possible. And also, if there's a specific question that you have, and I don't know if the raise hand feature is enabled, but if it is, then go ahead and raise your hand and we can acknowledge you that way as well. But minimally speaking, go ahead and put things into the chat feature because that way we maintain a sort of written account of what the questions are and we can make sure that we answer them. Okay. So the first thing I wanted to do is just a reminder that there are two primary sources of information right now that if you've not yet made a habit of checking on a semi-regular basis, it would be good for you to do so. Obviously, it's hard at this point to not be aware of the UC San Diego COVID-19 info link, which appears pretty much on every major web page associated with UC San Diego. Please do make a habit of going to that regularly. I believe those of you who are signed up for Triton Alert will get an alert on your mobile device every time there's something posted from the university that's an update to this site. And then relatedly, the Graduate Division's website now has a Grad Life Dean's Updates section. And this is an important place where we will point out various things that are specific to graduate students, along with a link that will allow you to have an archival history of everything that's been posted over the past many weeks and months. This can be useful in case you have a question, you forgot where something is, it's likely going to be there. Okay, next slide. There's a few things that we want to point out in particular. On Saturday, June 13th, is commencement, and many of you are at that stage where you have completed your degrees. And commencement this year will be a virtual ceremony. You have to register, so we hope everyone has registered. If students registered for virtual commencement after May 26th, then their name unfortunately will not appear on the program. But nonetheless, we hope you can participate on this. I do believe they're going to record that so you can watch it at a later date. In terms of celebrating first-generation graduates, if any of you is a first-gen graduate and would like to be featured on the web page by June 13th, please submit your profile by June 7th. And there's a link there that you'll be able to go to. If you have any questions, feel free to let us know. Many of you have heard of this thing called UCPath, and I know we attended recently a meeting of the Graduate Student Association to get into some of the specifics about this. Basically, UCPath is a new payroll system that has been slowly rolled out across the entire UC system. we at UC San Diego are among the very last institutions to roll this out. So the good news there is a lot of the kinks that some of the other UC schools experienced have been ironed out. And we feel really, really positive that this thing is going to implement just fine. Most important thing that we can say for UCPath is please remember to sign up for direct deposit. That makes everything so much more smooth. Tell your friends as well to sign up for direct deposit. Finally, a lot of you have heard, or maybe all of you have heard about the Return to Learn program. This program, this pilot data collection program is ending today. And again, it's making COVID-19 testing available to all graduate students who are currently living on campus. It is a pilot test. And what the university and our experts learn from this will hopefully inform a much broader scale approach to testing and contact tracing that we hope will enable all of us to get back to some kind of more normal operations in the future. So I think after this Zoom chat is done, you'll have a few hours, those of you who still live on campus, will have a few hours to go ahead and participate in this. If you haven't, and there's a link there, returntolearn.ucsd.edu. Let me say a few words about the future. First and foremost, we don't know 100% what the future is going to be in terms of fall quarter. We are planning as an administration and as a faculty, we're planning really for every contingency, which means we have polled all of the departments to work with the administration to try and plan for the possibility of some offerings of undergraduate courses in person, knowing full well that at any given time, if things aren't safe or if things sort of regress, we may have to go back to fully remote in the fall. But as of now, the plan, the hope, the aspiration is that we'll be able to return to some version of in-person learning for a proportion of the courses offered to undergraduates. Not 100%, but a proportion. For now, the aspiration is to have all graduate students who are able to live in housing, to invite them back to housing, because remember, a lot of our graduate students haven't moved out of housing. So we want to continue to invite graduate students to be in person. And part of what we are thinking about is the research ramp-up efforts that will be required for the university. Since graduate students, you are an important part of the research, how are we going to ramp up research? Well, a few things I want to say here. A university announcement is soon going to be going out that's going to describe the efforts the university is taking to slowly ramp up research. There's several phases to this, and what we're trying to do is slowly ease back into research. PIs will receive clear guidelines on how to seek permission to start up research activities, and any approved research activity will have to follow safety procedures, which include required social distancing, the use of protective equipment, PPE, and each situation is going to have to be reviewed independently. And there's a whole process through the Vice Chancellor for Research and the deans and the department chairs and the PIs. And everybody's being walked through this very, very carefully. So the ramp up of research will be gradual. And any research that can be conducted remotely is going to continue to be encouraged to be conducted remotely for the time being. And conversely, research that simply cannot be conducted remotely, slowly we're going to ramp up those research activities, inviting personnel back to campus. Now, what does that mean for graduate students? Well, graduate students are not to be compelled to be part of this sort of required personnel. But we understand that many graduate students are eager to return to research. And PIs understand that any plans for returning to research that absolutely include graduate students, well, those have to simply go through the approval process that all research has to go through, just to make sure we're ensuring the safety of every individual. So what you need to know is if you have any questions about the research that you might be a part of, you should first consult your PI or your advisor, as well as know that they are in contact with the department chair. You should feel free to ask questions. And there will also be a clear set of directions for how any person on campus can report concerns. So if you see something that's just doesn't feel quite right, and people are supposed to be wearing masks in the lab and it seems like they're not, or there's more people in the lab than what everybody agreed to, there's going to be a process for how to report that, essentially, so we can fix those problems quickly. Okay, let me turn our attention now to Kerrs Act. So for those of you who are not familiar, the Kerrs Act was an act that was passed at the federal level, which distributed monies in a whole host of ways throughout the country. For colleges and universities, there were distributions of dollars to assist. And the Kerrs Act funding announcement was sent on May 14th, 2020. And there's a link there that you'll be able to go to find out more information. And the idea here is to basically take these monies and with some eligibility requirements that unfortunately the federal government set, universities were then allowed to distribute these monies for need. And so it took the financial aid office a few days to get awarding these monies. But as of May 26, the approved grants through May 22nd had already been awarded. And when a student submits an application for this money and it is approved, the financial aid office is able to issue the award that evening. So it happens very, very quickly. And so if there are students who've not been, who've not yet been awarded and feel that they are eligible and would like to apply for some of these funds, they should reach out to our Assistant Dean, April Bjornson, and her email is there. A campus-wide announcement went out about this. And again, if you go to the Dean's, Graduate Division Dean's website there, you'll see a repeat of that campus announcement. So how did the Kerrs Act work for graduate students? Well, first of all, we set aside 10% of the overall allocation that was given to the university. And we set it aside specifically for graduate and professional students. Now, this is not the only source of money that we've set aside to aid graduate and professional students. There are other substantial sources and pots of money that we also have set aside to enable not only this population of eligible graduate students, but also the many graduate students, for example, international students, DACA students, et cetera, who are not eligible for the CARES money. So we have set aside other pots of money. We decided to distribute these funds through our already existing basic needs framework. So our goal has been to aid those graduate and professional students with the greatest need, as opposed to simply giving small flat grants to all students. We went back and forth on this. Should we just give everybody a flat grant? And we realized when we did the math that those flat grants, though every amount of money is certainly helpful, those flat grants were going to be in such a small amount that they wouldn't be most helpful to the people who most needed it. And in fact, some money would be going to students who, for the most part, wouldn't need any support or felt they wouldn't need any support. And we didn't want to get into a situation where we would reimburse those monies and then have to redistribute. So we decided to use the basic needs framework that was already in place and invite any eligible graduate student to apply for funds. And we've been very generous and been very quick in terms of distributing those monies. Unlike other universities, please go back one slide. Unlike other universities, we specifically decided to aid those with greatest need, and we did not require the FAFSA to access these monies. Several other UC schools required graduate students to file a FAFSA to even be eligible to apply for these monies. And we decided to kill that step, so we didn't want to make things overly bureaucratic. So what have been the results so far? We'll go to the next slide. So in terms of general campus, as of Tuesday, May 26, 61% of the $1.4 million that was set aside for graduate and professional students has already been distributed. So in other words, $854,000 in grants have been distributed to about 685 graduate or professional students. And the average award has been slightly over $1,200 per person. For the School of Medicine and the School of Pharmacy, 69% of the allocation has been distributed. So about $230,000 in grants have been committed, and the average grant amount there is a little over $1,000. So you can see that there's still a little bit of money left in both of these pots of money. We feel that that's both a good sign that we have some money that we're able to continue spending. And we also feel that the allocation that we've set aside, along with the additional funds that we've also set aside, feel about right. Let's go to the next slide. So now any money that is not distributed at the end of this academic term, we're simply going to roll over into summer and use it as summer support to aid students who have needs in the summer. If there are any funds left from the undergraduate allocation and that those funds go unspent, then the Vice Chancellor for Student Affairs and I have agreed that we will explore redistributing those undergraduate monies over to the graduate and professional student pool, should in fact there be a demonstrated demand and need. All right, we'll go to the next slide. So I'm going to open it up for Q&A here in a moment, but before we do that, I think it's important for me to acknowledge something, just as your dean. Right now in our country, we're dealing with a tremendous crisis of violence against people of color. And it's really heart-wrenching to see what has happened in Minneapolis, Minnesota. But what has happened there has been something that's been happening for years and years and years. And this senseless violence, this senseless murder of individuals, Black individuals, African Americans, people of color, is inexcusable. And I think it's really, really important for us to acknowledge the difficulty of this moment and not just go with business as usual. It's important for us to name this racism and these racist acts, and to realize that we collectively have a responsibility to call out what we see. I also want to encourage those of you to pay attention to a recent announcement that went out from all of our community centers, inviting any of you who would like to have conversations in a safe space about these or a variety of other issues to please use those resources. They are open to graduate and professional students. They're not just spaces for undergraduates. And of course, if at any time you feel like there's any need for you to speak with somebody, we are always available, as is our incredible team at CAPS. So thank you to all of you. I know many of you as graduate and professional students care deeply about these issues, and I just felt it was important for us to acknowledge it. So with that said, I want to go ahead and open the forum here. We're going to go ahead and look at the questions that have been posted and answer them as much as we can one by one. So, so the first question is, hi, I'm wondering whether there will be any changes to out-of-state tuition given the current situation. So at this stage, tuition is set, of course, at the system level, and there isn't any conversation that I'm aware of happening at the UC system level regarding tuition changes. I do believe that there has not been any commitment to change tuition by increasing it. But that's the only conversation that's been had at this point. I think I've answered the how much of the Kerrs Money Act is still available. It looks like about 40-something% of the allocation that we set aside is still available. How was it determined that 10% Kerrs Act funding going to UCSD students would be going to grad students? I asked because the statistics seem to show that the enrollment is around 20% graduate and 80% undergrad. Grad students are predominantly self-supporting and tend to support dependents more than undergrads and may experience larger financial burdens than undergrads. Thanks for the question. It's a great question. So we set aside 10% because it was our best guess as a place to start in terms of where to distribute the allocation. You know, it should be mentioned that not every university around the country set aside anything for graduate and professional students, but the 10% for us was a good start, knowing that we also had access to other funds and that if we needed to adjust, as I've already said, we could redistribute some monies from the pool of undergraduates over to graduates. So far, the usage rate of the monies indicate that we're still in that zone where we have monies available for individuals who are in need. Though there are certainly a lot of graduate students who are self-supporting, actually the statistics are clear that many, if not most, of our graduate students continue to receive generous financial support from the university, whether in the form of fellowships or PI-based research assistantships. Those of you who are working as TAs, that money has not gone away. So it's, you know, it's clear to us that the levels of support that are paid to students, to graduate students, we've worked really, really hard to protect those and not allow those to be diminished. And we also continue to aggressively pursue the financial reforms that I announced back in fall with the EVC to make sure that future generations of graduate students continue to receive commitments, including the now impending 5-year full funding commitment that we're going to put in place for the entering class of 2021. We'll leave it for more questions. I have a question about out-of-state tuition. I'll be entering a PhD program this fall from out of state and wonder if staying at home through the fall quarter will affect tuition rates for year 2, since California residency would not be established by the beginning of year 2. This is a great question. We are working right now with the residence deputy at UC San Diego to try and resolve this question. We don't have a specific answer yet, but we're fully aware that the issue of physical residency is something that we have to try and have an answer to in terms of how it influences ability for a second-year student to be categorized as resident. As soon as we have clarity on that issue, we will post that as quickly as possible. Another question, how do you see the cuts in the governor's budget affecting continued funding for UC San Diego and the 5-year guaranteed funding initiative in the future? Those of you who are following the news know that the governor of the state of California has done a revision, what they call a May revision to the overall budget. And of course, the UC system, as is true with pretty much everything in California, is expected to take a cut. What's happening right now is that the administration and the faculty are going to be working together over the next many months to figure out what that cut means. The EVC and I have been clear in our guidance to the faculty and the deans that as we think about making adjustments to the university's budget, a few things need to remain stable. One of those is funding for graduate students. We do not want to look at graduate student funding as an area of cut. We're committed to continuing to support our graduate students, and we are also committed to moving forward on the 5-year funding commitment, beginning with the cohort of 2021. In fact, Associate Dean Kim and I have now met with every single academic division and school to begin the process of planning for that 5-year funding guarantee, 3-year funding for MFAs, and we're moving forward on that. These are great questions. Feel free to continue typing them into the box.
And I'll just jump in here. Thanks, Jim. There was a question emailed to us from a student. Said, I was wondering if you could tell me about the possibility of the fall semester getting deferred or going online, and how would this affect on-campus housing applications? And this may be coming from a newly admitted student. I'm not sure. So if you want to address that, Jim?
Yeah, let me address the first part. So several weeks ago, we approached the Faculty Senate to ask for permission to allow international graduate students who were unable to obtain a visa and enter the United States to be able to begin their studies as graduate students remotely. We recognize that many of our international graduate students, there are just significant delays right now with visa processing. In some countries, you can't even get an appointment until way later in the fall, November, December, much after the point at which students would be expected to begin their studies here. So what this dispensation from the Faculty Senate allows departments to do is to be flexible with those first-year students who cannot enter the country and cannot obtain a visa. So the best advice I have, if that's a situation that you find yourself in, is to be in immediate communication with your department to figure out what their plans are for any coursework in the fall. Let me make this really clear. Fall is not postponed, okay? We are going to have a fall quarter. What is not clear is what the balance between in-person and remote will look like. This is something that changes on what feels like a weekly, daily basis. But as I said at the beginning of this webinar, we are all, the faculty and the staff and the administration, attempting to put procedures in place and some plans in place that will allow some level of in-person learning when possible. We're going to all have to remain super flexible on this and recognize that nobody has a firm answer, but we know that we're moving in the direction of really trying to have as much in-person activity as is safely possible. And part of the Return to Learn initiative, the pilot that we've been running that ends today, is to allow us to see if it's possible to do the kind of broad scale testing that will allow us to do in-person learning at some level and feel safer about it. The second part of that question, Judy, had to do with housing. And I don't have the answer to that. I think we're going to have to refer you to housing, dining, and hospitality if you have any specific questions about your housing requests should you not be able to actually appear in the fall quarter.
And in the same email, there was a question about immunization requirements for international students. And I think the best answer to that is to refer any questions about that to our International Students and Program Office, ISPO, and they're the ones who will know the details of the immunization requirements. So I would encourage you to look at that website and reach out to those folks.
Thank you. There's a good question here. Are Kerrs monies available to newly admitted graduate students, those who have accepted their offer and paid their deposit? Unfortunately, at this time, that's not the framework under which we're operating. The monies that have been distributed to the institution have been dedicated to students who are already matriculating. Feel free to keep the questions coming.
Or feel free to use raise your
water.
hand if you'd like. I think you can all, make some type of either the blue hand clapping or thumbs up or any indication if you'd like to ask a question verbally.
Thanks for the question. There's a lengthy question here about the cost of housing and the burden that graduate students feel with respect to cost of living here and the overall proportion of income that graduate students make. And I do recognize that this is an issue that continues to be an important conversation among all of us. The crux of your question is Graduate Division doing anything to keep campus housing affordable for grads? And I think the answer is yes. We talk to campus officials on a regular basis about what the levels of graduate rent would be. We're trying to balance two things. We're trying to balance the need to make sure that we're able to actually pay for the housing that's provided to graduate students and build the housing that's necessary. And the second thing is we're trying to understand where we are in terms of the overall income that graduate students make. It's really the second issue where Graduate Division has the most influence. And so let me tell you a couple of things that are really, really important here. One is the Graduate Division's paramount importance in helping the campus realize that graduate student funding has to be stabilized. So the fact that we're in a situation here right now at UC San Diego where we've been able to protect graduate student funding this quarter, where we're moving into the fall with our commitments in place, as opposed to some other universities that have actually pulled back on graduate funding or pulled back on offers or have actually constrained or eliminated the admission of graduate students. We're doing just the opposite. We're staying fully committed to funding our graduate students. The second thing is, as I've indicated before, with all of the cuts that are going on, or expect to go on across the state. We've been very, very clear that graduate student funding and student financial aid in general is one of the areas that we do not want to touch. We recognize how important it is for students to have a sense of stability, and funding brings a level of stability to students' lives. Is there more that needs to be done? Absolutely. If any of you were following my arrival here as dean at the beginning of this academic year, I made it very, very clear that one of my agendas as dean is to try and have a robust conversation on this campus about not only how do we stabilize graduate funding, but how do we give long-term predictable commitments to graduate students, and how do we figure out a strategy to increase graduate student funding in a way that makes sense and in a way that's doable. I'm not going to lie to you. This is going to be a challenging lift in the current fiscal climate, but it's something that I know I'm very, very committed to, and we'll continue trying to figure out how to address the levels of graduate student funding at this university. Okay, so I'm an incoming computer science grad student. The program has indicated that courses for fall will likely be online. However, I'm interested in living on campus for in-person access to labs. Is this a valid option to explore? Yeah, absolutely. You should go ahead and contact HDH and do the necessary application procedures. HDH is not making discriminations about whether a person is in a program with courses that are being delivered remotely or not, so absolutely you should continue pursuing your housing application. Any other questions? I'm going to leave this channel open for another 30 seconds, but if in about 30 seconds we don't see any other questions posted, then we'll go ahead and adjourn our meeting. Okay, I have the same question. Will the university guarantee admission for fall 2021? I'm not sure I understand what is meant by will the university guarantee admission for the fall 2021. I think what I can say is we are pursuing a graduate cohort in all of our programs for fall 2021. There's been no announcements about eliminating admissions for fall 2021. So if that's what is being asked, that would be the answer. So the UC CAPS fee, I don't have any particular information or insight into why it passed. It's a student voted referendum. And obviously, I believe from my perspective, there was quite a bit of opportunity for comment and for input into, the levels at which the funding was being proposed. But at the end of the day, that was a referendum that was passed by students themselves. I see Rachel Flanagan is in the Zoom, the GSA, outgoing GSA president. I don't know if there's any more there that Rachel wants to weigh in on. I'm sort of putting her on the spot. And if not, that's fine. Okay, as a newly admitted grad student in an MS thesis program, I feel cross-department research coursework collaboration would be affected, putting me at a disadvantage in securing GSR positions, or because the PI has less interaction or other department courses not available online. Is this a valid concern? I don't know what your department is, but I'd encourage you to reach out immediately to your department and ask this specific question. I think it's important for you to go ahead and reach out to them and see what their plans are in terms of the opportunities for GSR positions for you in your particular situation. And then the question about mental health, I do not have an answer as to what the level is and why it's being charged. I simply do not have an answer. I apologize. And I do not have that specific information, but I do believe that there are others who know that and can get into the details with you. With some classes being half in person, half online, will TAs have the flexibility to decide if they want their section to be online, if they do not feel comfortable being in person? Will there be specific guidelines for professors? Thanks for the question. We've been very, very clear as a university to all departments and to all deans that even though the ambition, the goal is to have some level of in-person classes in the fall, at no time ever will anybody ever be required to do something that's not safe or with which they are not comfortable. This includes if something has been scheduled to be online and for whatever reason, the faculty member or the TA feels this is just not safe or I don't feel comfortable doing this, then what we've told the faculty and the deans is that they have to just simply go through a process of trying to figure out alternatives for the delivery of that class to ensure the educational continuity of the class. So the EVC and the senior administration has been incredibly clear about this. Other than that, the bottom line is nobody wants to compel anybody to do anything that's unsafe. We recognize that. What other jobs will be available for international students apart from TAs? Where can I find the information? I'm going to invite Tamara, who's on the call, to go ahead and post into the chat when she has a moment the link. But on the Graduate Division website, there is an employment link, and there are two digital marketplaces that graduate students can go to that specifically will post positions on an ongoing basis. And so we encourage all of you to go ahead and do that very, very clearly. Great, thank you, Tamara. Just posted that. Would newly admitted international students be allowed to defer to fall 21 rather than enroll for remote classes? This is something that you need to ask specifically of the program that you were admitted to. We've given programs a great deal of flexibility to determine whether or not they wish to defer their students. And for each program, they sort of have different approaches to that. So the best thing that you can do is, if you have a question about this, is to go ahead and reach out immediately to your academic program. Okay, so there's another question about, I'm in a program, computer science, and it's going to classes online for fall 2020. In case if we are unable to get a visa and take the fall quarter online from our home country, what are the guidelines for CPT eligibility? So CPT, OPT, right, Judy? Isn't that what we're talking about here? So what I can tell you, first and foremost, we are not the experts on this, and you should absolutely reach out to the International Scholars and Programs Office on any questions you have regarding OPT and CPT eligibility. What I can say, which has been said to us from that office, is that there has to date been some flexibility on this. And so it'll be important for you to go ahead and reach out to that office and to see what that flexibility looks like. Will there be a commitment to be flexible with regards to time limits for pursuing a PhD going forward, especially due to potential trouble finding research? The Academic Senate has given UC San Diego the flexibility to extend various time limits for the current affected quarter. So basically extending things by 1 quarter. Of course, the Academic Senate would entertain the need for extending that even further should the situation demand it, and the Graduate Division will immediately request that kind of extension if necessary. We're really hoping, like I said earlier, with the ramp up to research that's happening as soon as next week, there's going to be a slow and steady ramp up of research, that research opportunities will start to become plentifully available for graduate students, and that we'll get back into a situation where the impact on time to degree will be mitigated.
And if I could just add to that, Jim, just so you all know, if there are any individuals that feel like additional time is needed, consult with your advisor or the grad coordinator, because there is always a mechanism to submit a request to get extensions. And we evaluate those on a weekly basis. We are fully sensitive to the issues, the challenges with COVID-19, as well as other issues. You know, it could be a variety of reasons. So that mechanism still exists. It will always exist. So for any individual, you can reach out to your department to request some extensions.
Yeah, and I know we're getting some very good questions about computer science. Thank you for those questions. I just encourage you to reach out immediately to computer science, because they're going to be the best source of information about all of these questions. There's a question here about, is it true that some graduate programs made no offers to incoming students this year, perhaps due to the unusual situation? If so, do you know which? No, that's not true. Okay, once I have enrolled for courses fall 2020, would I still be able to defer in case I am not able to get a visa? Again, keep in touch with your graduate program about that. Any sort of decisions around deferral, it'll be really, really important to get that straight from the department. If you have any questions that are not getting responded to by your department, feel free to email the graduate division, and we can help to facilitate some communication between you and the department. Okay. Well, I want to thank everybody for joining us today. If you find that there are any questions that you still want to ask or that occur to you after the fact, feel free to send them to graduatedean@ucsd.edu, and one of us will make sure that we respond to you in a timely fashion. But good luck with everything. I hope that you know, the rest of this academic term, for those of you who are currently enrolled, goes smoothly. For those of you who are newly admitted, welcome to UC San Diego. We're thrilled to meet you. Although our meeting may not be in person right away, eventually it will be, and we look forward to having that opportunity. So thank you everybody for joining us, and we will talk to you again.